A couple of reflections, I guess. One of which is that I very much agree with Janette that it's easy to become paralyzed with all the options and the hugeness of this plan and all the objectives in it. And so I think actually having an opportunity maybe to sit down collectively in a day planning session and actually think through some practical, let's get started. Let's build some momentum. Let's do a bit of piloting and getting going on something, I think is really worthwhile doing, because otherwise I can appreciate how daunting it can look, and it could lead to that kind of paralysis. I really got excited, I did, at our table about this opportunity for these community level deliberations linked to a citywide deliberation. And I think that's really interesting and really captures and taps into the possibilities for communities to take some action and to build some momentum around some of these goals and objectives. And then for the city to be looking at what I'd call that enabling environment and making it possible for communities to use their imagination and actually do some things out in their own communities that make sense. And I think that's a really exciting piece as well. I like the idea of, I'm going to add a new word in here, combining generative dialogue and deliberative dialogue. So the generative dialogue being the kind of thing that Peter's been talking about in terms of releasing social imagination and really catalyzing some potential new ideas as well. So that's been kind of really interesting for me, and how do we bring that generative piece into it as well. And I guess the last thing I've been reflecting on is something actually David said yesterday, which was about, we sometimes start with transformation and turn it into tweaks. And so this is a really exciting, to me, transformative possibility. So how do we really keep the energy of that transformation alive and not let it fall into just being a bunch of tweaks that in the end don't really make a whole bunch of difference? So
I think we recognize that the implementation of the way we green is more about social change and social transformation than it is about infrastructure or anything else. The infrastructure is only going to come if the social change occurs. So achieving that is obviously, I think, what we've all been talking around. And I'll come back to that in a second too, but this idea of it being difficult and it maybe not getting it perfect. I'm a recovering perfectionist. My name is Don. Hi. And I'm learning to accept imperfection, and so I think I agree we need to do something, and we have a really great excuse, which is, at least around this part of the world, we're the first people trying anything like this. So we get to say, it's the first time, bear with us. It might not work perfectly, but we're learning and we have good intentions. And I think people will come along with that, and then someone else can do it better the second time, or we can do it better the second time or third time. But the idea that's really stuck with me is this question of how to make it durable. And lasting, and reflecting on the big consultations that the city did in 2007, where we had great buy-in and lots of survey work. People wanted to do all the things that are in the way we green. They don't know how to get there. They don't know what it's going to look like in their lives, but they know that that's what a progressive 21st century city looks like. They want to do that. They're at the risk of a generalization, ready to do that, or they were when we were talking about it. But then, the further and further away we get from that, the harder and harder it is to reference back to it. So how do you make it durable? And I've been thinking about this idea that if you have sort of a new parliament in a meaningful sense, as a deliberative space, and you can, on the one hand, balance the desire to have it be truly diverse, truly random in a sense, and not overly reflective of a consensus or a majority or an influential, pervasive kind of position, then how can you harness the diversity that's in that room to go back out to the networks and the communities that those people belong to? So I was thinking about, somebody mentioned there are great multicultural organizations in the city, and I think you very sensitively have to ask, would you feel comfortable now, having been part of this citizen deliberation, going back and even before the citizen deliberation is done, connecting through some of these organizations with some resources and support to take these conversations out into your communities? And I think that, and a way to sustain those and make those, all of those different organizations and all the tremendous social capital that exists in the city, how to mobilize that to this, I think that's the only way you could possibly do it have it have the broad reach, and have it have some sense of durability. So a design question for me would be, how do you build in that durability and sort of ongoing cyclical reinforcement of whatever kind of consensus has come out of or common ground at the very least comes out of a process like this. So that's what's got me really, really excited.
Lots of, just really, really neat ideas. I mean, the whole subject that we're dealing with this afternoon is an idea, and everything that's come out of people's mouths are just ideas about that, and that's exciting. Some of the basic truths that hadn't struck me before that I think are worth mentioning again. I think Janette said something roughly like, unless we find new ways of collaborating, we will never round the corner to become sustainable. And I think that speaks to the complexity of all these issues that we're dealing with, and it's not an engineered solution anymore. It's really a community discussion and a community effort. And I think you can't prove that statement, but I think it's true. And I think Fiona said something similar about the complex issues of our times require us to redesign the policy development process that we use in our institutions. Again, I think that's right on the mark and in line with what Janette said earlier. In terms of designing our process, I think there's a lot of things I heard that need to be built into the process. The city needs to be serious, and that's something that is really something we're going to have to think about seriously. How do we build that into our mandate? How do we institutionalize it? We have to be serious. The process needs to be continuous and ongoing. It can't just be one really great exercise, one-off with 30 people who are inspired and go off and, it needs to be designed and incorporated into our overall management system. This isn't a one-off. This isn't something on the side. This is something that needs to be part of our everyday planning process, and we have lots of plans and lots of planning processes, and deliberation needs to be used where it makes sense in those, and we need to figure out exactly where that is. Right issue at the right time. I don't think we can convince citizens whose time is precious to engage in just sort of discussions that go nowhere. So I think we have that's part of designing it and putting it into our system. Right issue at the right time, needs to feed into real decisions. Issue framing is essential. Not everybody wants to talk about climate change, but everybody wants to talk about their quality of life and those things that feed into to greenhouse gas emissions. And the youth engagement piece, we learned that in the way we green, that what we're talking about in sustainability is we're talking about Edmonton 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 years from now, and if they're not part of the discussion, it's just a bunch of old guys. I mean, we're missing the boat. My final thoughts is we've got to keep it simple, we've got to start somewhere, keep it relevant to the citizens who are going to be engaged, keep it systematic, not just one-offs, keep it honest and balanced, and yeah, let's get going.
I think deliberation is a different kind of conversation than we have through many other kinds of consultation. It's a very powerful form of conversation. It's a transformative form of conversation. It's also a very intense form of conversation. So it's not for every occasion. We saw the spectrum of participation. We talked about nudge, think, and shove. It's part of the picture. But it's from the conversations we've had here today, it's part of the picture that we perhaps haven't used enough to date around climate change. Because climate change is one of those co-produced problems that require co-produced solutions. A few of the key things this made me think about, looking at deliberation as enhanced conversation 2.0, or however we want to term it, deep conversations. It's basically, it can't just be about the occasions, the meetings, like we come in here and we have a nice deliberation and then it changes nothing. We just tack it on to the end of our decision-making process. We probably have to change the way we have conversations in everyday interactions with citizens. And importantly, and this was a point we raised at our table, how we have conversations within the city, within structures of power. So these are some of the things I think we need to look at. And I'm reminded of one of the first deliberative processes I really was heavily involved in, the Harrow Open Budget. On the day, it was an amazing event. We had people with 300 residents of Harrow in London come together over a whole day to discuss how the priorities for the budget for the future. We had council tax campaigners, people who hated the council with a passion, who'd signed up to come along and they were planning to walk out halfway through in front of the cameras to make a statement. They stayed for the whole day because they found the discussion so fulfilling. It wasn't their ordinary public meeting where you can stand up and shout at the guy at the front. It was a discussion with their neighbors, and they had to actually say, well, I think that tax levels are too high. Oh yeah, well, I need social services. I'm reliant on these services. And it nuanced their decisions. I think we had like an 85 to 90% satisfaction rate. It was an amazing thing on the day. And actually, the really sad thing is, when that had finished and the group went on to, then the event had finished, very little happened. And that was because they hadn't spent any time thinking about the next steps. There were citizens who wanted to stay involved after this event, who it changed them. They wanted to take a next action. There was no next action. It just went into the council and nothing happened. There were some citizens who took upon themselves to hold the process accountable, but they were given no support to actually translate, to look at the budget, which subsequently was passed, and translate the jargon into something which resembled what they had discussed on the day. So I think it's important. The day itself, the conversation itself is really, really crucial. But we also need to put a lot of effort into what goes before and what happens after if we want it to have its full impact. So I think we've got nudge, think, and shove. And if we just nudge and we just shove, that's quite rude. Citizens are likely to get quite annoyed. Whereas if we actually get to think a bit as well, I think we're really on the track to creating a sustainable society.
I'm just going to leave with one final thought because I think you've done such a wonderful job at synopsis. And that is, it starts with us, really. I mean, I think we all feel like we're so on the right track, and it's them, whoever the them might be, what needs to change. It's them that don't understand. It's them that really needs to somehow get it and be different. I think it starts with us. I think it starts with every single one of us, and I'm also a recovering perfectionist, of being willing to hand over to the wisdom of the people and just offering the opportunities for spaces for them to bring that wisdom, which is so often far better than whatever I could offer. I think if we can just model, do the Gandhi trick of, be the change that we want to see in the world, and it doesn't matter where we are in this system, I think we can really make some interesting and exciting steps forward. And hopefully the small pebbles that we throw are going to be things that would nudge the system in the direction that we want it to head in. You've been fabulous to work with, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Janette. Thank you all, panelists. Great.